For the final video this week, I will be discussing light and color. These are two of the formal elements of design. And we'll pick up next week talking about the final elements of design as well as the principles of design. If you'll recall from the last video, I talked about ways of creating space in both two-dimensional and three-dimensional works of art. One way of creating space in a two-dimensional work of art is the use of atmospheric perspective. Atmospheric perspective refers to the way in which atmosphere, or haze, relative clarity, changes the appearance of near and far objects. Objects that are farther away appear less distinct, they appear bluer in color, and the contrast between light and dark decreases. So it's like looking out across a mountain vista and seeing that the land directly in front of you is crisp, it's clear, you can see the rocks, you can see the moss or the lichen growing on the rocks. And then as you look farther out, the landscape becomes less distinct, it becomes hazier. The quality of the atmosphere is impeding your perception of detail. So in this image we're seeing value become lighter in the distance, and we're seeing color become bluer as we look out across these mountains. This image illustrates weaker atmospheric perspective and stronger atmospheric perspective. So the more effect the atmosphere is having, the less distinct objects become. We can't even see this final sphere in the background because there's stronger atmospheric perspective. In Nicolas Poussin's Autumn, we see the use of atmospheric perspective. We've got this highly detailed foreground, right? This portion of the composition that's closer to the viewer. We see individual leaves delineated in this bush. Again, we see rocks, pebbles described here. And then in the middle ground, we don't see as many individual leaves. The rocks all begin to blur together. And then in the very background, we've got this sort of hazy, almost foggy looking mountain. This is atmospheric perspective at work. As I mentioned, atmospheric perspective works using color in part, right? Objects become bluer as they recede in the background. So to understand a little bit more about color, we're going to take a look at the color wheel. The color wheel is made out of hues. It's kind of the purest color, and the hue is here described in the middle of this color wheel. The hue would be just the pure color, so pure yellow, the yellow hue. And then tints of a color are that color with a little bit of white added to it, a hint of white. And of course you can have more white, so a stronger tint, or less white, so kind of a weaker tint of the hue. You can also create shades of a color by adding black. So this is how many artists create shadows. They use a shade, they add a little bit of black to the hue. The color wheel is comprised of primary colors. This includes red, blue, and yellow. And you'll notice that these are equally distanced from each other. There's the same amount of space in between the primary colors. The color wheel also features secondary colors. These include orange, purple or violet, and green. So these are just the primary colors mixed together. Yellow and blue makes green, yellow and red makes orange, and then red and blue makes purple. And so you'll notice that all of the secondary colors are smack dab in the middle of the primary colors. Finally, there are tertiary colors. Tertiary colors are the combination of a primary and a secondary color. So yellow and orange makes yellow-orange. And you'll notice that the primary color always comes before the secondary color in the naming of the tertiaries. So we've got yellow-orange, primary yellow, secondary orange creates yellow-orange, and then we've got red-orange, red, purple, red-violet, etc. Colors can be warmer or cooler. So you can think about kind of things like flames for warmer colors. So we've got yellow, yellow-orange, orange-red, red-violet as warmer colors. And then we've got the cooler colors. So I think of things like water, cold water, the ocean being cooler. So on this half of the color wheel, we've got the cool colors. You can have different kinds of color schemes. So if you're combining multiple colors or using multiple colors in a composition, you can create color schemes. An analogous color scheme features hues that neighbor each other on the color wheel. Often this is based off of the temperature, the color temperature. So an example of an analogous color scheme would be the use of yellow, yellow-orange, and orange in a composition. A complementary color scheme employs hues that lie on the opposite side of the color wheel from each other. When these colors are used next to each other in a composition, the colors become more intense. So an example of a complementary color scheme would be red and green, because they're on the opposite side from each other. You can think of sports teams. The Broncos, that sports team uses a complementary color scheme of blue and orange. Here's a little illustration of some of the analogous color schemes and complementary color schemes. So if we're looking at an image, every image has a color scheme. It uses some sort of color or lack of color. So this is a complementary color scheme because it's featuring red and green, which are across from each other on the color wheel. This is an analogous color scheme because we're looking at yellow and green, so these are close to each other on the color wheel. Artists can also use a monochromatic color scheme. This is the use of one hue plus tints and shades of that hue. So here we're looking at yellow. The hue is yellow, and then we've got tints, right? Yellow plus white, and shades, yellow plus black. Pablo Picasso has used a monochromatic color scheme which uses blue as the hue here in The Old Guitarist. Colors can have different emotional effects. They can create a mood in works of art. Oftentimes we associate blue with melancholia, although that certainly is not universal. Not all cultures associate blue with melancholia. But in combination with the posture of these figures in Picasso's The Tragedy from 1903, the blue monochromatic color scheme is evocative of sorrow or devastation here. In contrast, this orange monochromatic scheme, this color scheme that uses orange as the primary hue with tints and shades, we've got a little bit more of a light-hearted mood. And certainly the color scheme working in conjunction with the body postures of the figures. This child here flicks out his hand in an almost dancerly manner. The way his legs are positioned seems as though he's about to twirl off the picture plane. The goat here is looking up almost adoringly at this female figure. So choices like the selection of colors can have a dramatic effect on how we perceive meaning in works of art. Of course, you can have a polychromatic color scheme. So in these examples by Picasso, we've got a great range of colors used here. Color can also be used symbolically. For example, this painting by Jean Fouquet, titled The Milan Diptych, represents the otherworldliness of this scene to the right. We're looking at a fairly odd composition. We've got this almost alien Madonna, Virgin Mary here, with this bulbous, round, spherical, exposed breast. She's surrounded by these angels, these saturated crimson and cobalt angels. They're entirely one color. And the symbolism behind these angels is that they're representative of cherubim and seraphim. So they represent different aspects of God's divine love. We see red and blue angels symbolic of cherubim and seraphim, God's divine love, frequently in medieval and early Renaissance paintings. And they're used really to contribute to the otherworldly atmosphere of this painting. They're used to situate the Virgin Mary in a heavenly realm, as opposed to sort of our earthly realm. However, as I mentioned before, this isn't universal. We have to be part of the culture to read into the symbolism of this color. Light can be used to create a sense of space. Chiaroscuro is the balance between light and dark, and it represents a gradual transition around a curved surface from levels of highlight to low light. So Leonardo da Vinci is quite the master of chiaroscuro. He has created this delicate transition between light and dark using modeling, or using this shadow and light falling on a surface to create form. This contrasts with Caravaggio's use of tenebrism, of these deep contrasts between highlights, or these areas that directly reflect a light source, and lowlights, or shadows, these areas that receive the least amount of light.